clarity often comes after movement, right? Because for the longest time, I feel like I used to just think that clarity has to come first, that God would tell me every single detail, and that He will show me exactly where I'm supposed to be going, and that He will give me the complete confidence before I took the first step. But if I'm being real, God has not done any of that, right? He has not done any of that, right? And that's honestly not how God has been teaching me to walk with Him. Like, a lot of the confidence and confirmation that we're waiting for actually comes after we've already started moving. When I looked at Samuel, I noticed something. Every single time that he heard his name, he got up, he moved. He didn't stay lying in bed saying, well, if this is really God, then He'll make it clearer. No, he didn't wait for God to say, Samuel, desire the Lord, or something like that. No, he didn't doubt, say, maybe I didn't hear properly. Maybe it's just, it was all in my head or something. Or maybe it's just, doubt. He didn't doubt himself. He just got up and he moved, right? He responded every single time. Even after the first time when Eli is like, no, I'm not the one calling you. You just expected him after the second time he hears his name to doubt and be like, maybe I heard wrong. It's just probably in my head or something. It's probably the wind outside. No, he got up every single time, right? He moved before he understood. And I think that's such a beautiful picture of how God often works. Because sometimes we're sitting there saying, God, tell me exactly where to go. God, show me every step. God, confirm it like 5 different ways, right? But like God is saying, I've already given you enough to take the first step. Movement often comes before the clarity. Like, we keep wanting the whole picture, but God just gives us a small snippet, right? And I remember hearing someone explain this on Instagram, and it really stayed with me, because there's another story that comes to mind. Like, it was about the disciples in the book of Acts, right? So when the disciples were sent out to preach the gospel, they didn't immediately know every destination they would end up in. They were ready, but they were already moving. That's the thing. They were already preaching. They were already obeying the instructions they had already been given. And then while they were moving, God redirected them towards Macedonia. And I thought that was really interesting, because God gave us the direction while they were already walking. He didn't give them the whole full structure, or instruction before they set out to preach, right? He gave it to them whilst they were active, right? And I think that's how many of us are living. We want to wait until we have the full picture. We're waiting for the first 10 steps before we are willing to take step 1, and we're asking God to reveal the whole staircase, and when he's only asking us to trust Him with the first step, right? And like, we also even want like the confirmation or the what you call this, that certainty that it's gonna be a success, it's gonna work out, But I think that's also like not understanding what God only says, where He says, "Oh, we walk by faith and not by sight," right? If you knew the whole picture, that's sight, right? But faith is taking the first step without even knowing what the other steps look like. And the first step is always the scariest, to be honest, because you don't even know if this is going to work out or not, right? You're just going for it, right? So sometimes the confirmation comes after obedience, right? Not before it. And that's something that I'm learning right now in my own life. Like I mentioned earlier on, that I'm applying for jobs, and honestly speaking, there are days when I look at a job description and I think, I have no business applying for this. I have no business applying for this. I have a degree, but I don't have the experience, right? And naturally, imposter syndrome starts speaking louder than the faith. Then I just have to remind myself of Samuel, right? Samuel didn't know God's voice yet. And the Bible, like I said, didn't say not yet, right? He said God still called him, right? God didn't wait until Samuel knew his voice perfectly. God didn't wait until Samuel already felt ready, or before he was a whole prophet and everything, had everything figured out. He just called him anyway. And I feel like that phrase, not yet, has really stayed with me, because maybe there were some of us who are just like me. You're saying, I'm not experienced yet, I'm not confident yet, I'm not ready yet, I don't know enough yet. But not yet doesn't mean never. It simply means you're still growing, you're still learning, you're still becoming. And I think God has never been intimidated by someone's lack of experience, right? If He was, He would never have called Moses, He would never have called Gideon or Jeremiah or Samuel, right? Because we literally see it throughout the Bible that God keeps choosing ordinary people who simply make themselves available. And I think that's where I found so much peace in Because now, instead of praying, God, show me every single step before I move, or God, show me the signs, or let the heavens open up, right? My prayer has honestly changed. Now I'm just praying, Lord, here I am, right? I'm available. Lead me where you want me to go. Every morning I get up and say, Lord, show me how I can be available today, right? That's honestly like the prayer that I'm making. Show me how I can be available today. And then I'll just feel it in my spirit. Okay, I should send my CVs. I should fill up these applications. I should, do this online course that will help my CV look better and stuff like that, right? So I've just been putting myself out there, not because I feel qualified, but because I'm making myself available. And I trust that where God doesn't want me to be, He's more than capable of closing that door. And where He does want me to be, He was more than capable of opening that one. And no one can shut it, like He says in Revelation 3:7. So now, of course, this doesn't mean that we have to abandon wisdom. It doesn't mean we stop using discernment. No, God gave us those things for a reason. He gave us wisdom for a reason. We will still evaluate the opportunities. We still pray. We still ask. And Lord, does this opportunity reflect your character? Is this environment that will nourish the gifts that you've placed inside me? Will this place draw me closer to you or further away from you? Right? Those questions still matter, right? Wisdom and discernment still what? Matter. Fear should never be the one thing that's making your decisions, because fear keeps us frozen. Faith keeps us moving. And I honestly think that the lessons God has been teaching me in this season is that sometimes He's not waiting for us to become qualified. He's just simply waiting for us to say, here I am. So I think there's just one thing that I want you to take away from this whole episode, and it's this: make yourself available. The place we're praying for opportunities that we're not positioning ourselves to receive. That is the honest truth, right? We're praying for a job, but we're not sending CVs. We're praying for a husband or a wife, but we're not putting ourselves out there in a way that honors God. We're praying for a business, but we've never started, right? We're praying for God to use us, but we're waiting until we feel qualified. And I think God is just saying, I've already given you enough to take the first step. Just move, right? Make yourself available. And I think that's exactly what Samuel teaches us, that every single time he heard his name, his response was, here I am. He didn't know it was God. He didn't understand what was happening. He didn't have all the other brother had no clue, right? But he made himself available. And I think that's the posture that God is looking for. A heart that always says, Lord, I don't know everything. I don't have it all figured out. I don't even know if I'm ready. But here I am. Use me, right? And I honestly think that that's one of the most beautiful prayers we can pray, because availability gives God something to work with. Fear doesn't. Fear keeps us standing still, and it honestly just traps us in this cloud of overthinking, okay? Because maybe you've been waiting for a sign that God has already given. Maybe you've been asking for the confirmation when He's simply asking you to just be obedient, right? And the truth is, there are some things you will never be ready for. That's the honest truth. You will never feel completely ready to start a business, honestly. You're never going to feel completely ready to start your first job. You'll never really feel completely ready to start marriage. You're never going to feel completely ready to step into your calling, or there will always be something that's going to tell you to wait. There's always going to be excuses, right? Excuses are like a river that never runs dry, right? It's just always flowing. They're always flowing. But sometimes waiting, it's not wisdom. Sometimes it's fear wearing the clothes of wisdom, right? And that's something that God really has been challenging me about. It's just really been teaching me that you need to stop waiting for the perfect confidence and just start walking in faith. Because confidence is not always about what comes first, right? Sometimes confidence is built as you keep walking with God, and sometimes clarity will just come in the movement, right? So that confirmation that you're looking for, it will come after the obedience. So whenever you feel like you're in a season of your life when you're asking yourself this question, what is the next step that God has already placed in front of me? Not the next 10 steps, not the whole journey, just the first step, right? Take it one step at a time, right? Maybe it's sending an application, maybe it's making that phone call, maybe it's starting that course or writing the first page or serving where you are. Maybe it's simply saying, Lord, here I am. Don't underestimate that power and that prayer, because throughout the Bible, God has done extraordinary things through ordinary people who simply made themselves available. And I believe He is still doing the same thing today. So whenever it is that God has placed in your heart, take the step. Trust him with the outcome. Trust him with the doors that need to be closed and the doors that need to be opened, because God who calls you is also the God who walks with you, right? He literally says, I will walk with you, right? And if he has called you, he's more than qualified to walk with you along the way, right? He will qualify you himself.